The title of today's lecture, I'm very proud of this, the Warren County Archives and the Secrets of the Infirmary Time Capsule. Sounded like a Harry Potter book to me, and I like that. First off, some of you may not know we had an infirmary. In fact, we've had three, and our speaker today will talk about the three and the various names it went by. And the fact that there was a time capsule in the third one and when it was placed there and what they found in that. Our speaker today is Jenifer Baker. She is the Deputy Archivist of the Warren County Record Center and Archives. A graduate of Monroe High School. She grew up in Middletown and Monroe area. Went to Miami University, my alma mater, and got her undergraduate degree in history there. In the next 10 years, she worked in the retail and corporate management field, but she was also working on her master's degree at Wright State, where I got my master's degree. And her degree was in public history. She got an internship, archival internship at the Warren County Records Center and Archives in January of 2015, and a few months later, she became the deputy director, deputy archivist. The Archives has been committed to providing county agencies with exceptional record management since its establishment, I believe in 2001. This department consists of two divisions, the Record Center and Archives, and the Microfilm Department. These two units work collaboratively to preserve and make available government records to researchers, genealogists, internal and external agencies, and also the public. It's a fascinating place, and I can tell Jenifer enjoys her job because of the, follow them on Facebook. You'll find fascinating things every other week or so. She did not anticipate, she said, that she loved working with public records and the public. In addition to her education and work experience, she's a wife and mother of 11-year-old, she's a wife and a mother of 11-year-old daughter, and also two rescue dogs, from what I understand. She's not used to talking to people this old, I should say, this mature. Usually there'll be a teacher standing by and saying, now pay attention, class. But I told them, you are good students here. And you're here because you also want to learn. I think this will be a fascinating story. I think this will be one you'll enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, Jenifer Baker.
Hi, how are you? Okay. So as John said, I'm typically the education outreach coordinator as well, so I do speak to students a lot, and I've spoken to them about this topic quite a bit, so hopefully you enjoyed as much as they do. So my talk today is about the infirmary. We titled our exhibit that we created in 2015, The Infirmary, 140 Years of Housing the Forgotten. I'm going to speak a little bit about the exhibit and about the history of the infirmary, and then as John mentioned, we did find a time capsule in that building, and then a little bit about the Record Center and what we do there. So this whole process began, I was an intern from January until May of 2015, and one of my first tasks as the deputy archivist at Warren County was to replace an exhibit that had been in our administration lobby for quite a while. So it was myself and then two of our interns for the summer, Shelby Dixon and Tori Roberts. We were trying to, first of all, only one of us knew a lot about Warren County history. I'm mainly from the Butler County area and I live in Montgomery County, so I didn't really know much about Warren County. And one of the first things that we always like to do when creating exhibits for the archives is to see if we can tell the history using primarily our records. So what happened was we got the idea because this particular photograph was hanging, or was actually sitting in the archive storage area. And just looking at it, I mean, the building's beautiful, but it just has like a kind of a haunting aspect to it. And the picture that's hanging in the archives looks a little bit creepier than this one. So that was one of the reasons we chose this. Pat Grove, she used to work for the archives. She really is the person that gave us the idea to look this up a little bit further, because if you're familiar with the infirmary or the Health and Human Services Department that's on East Street, that is also the building where the infirmary was located. So we decided that we were going to research this further and see if we could find any information about the infirmary. To us, when we first started looking, I think our main focus was just to do a building history, because the building itself that's there today is, we can tell that it's old, and it has a cornerstone on the front that says 1916, so we already knew when that building was built, but then we wanted to find out the history of how it got from this building, which looks significantly different, to the building that is there today. So we started looking up information in our records to see if we could put that history together. And let me see. As we were looking through the commissioner's journals, which are a huge resource to a lot of people, and I don't think they realize it, we were able to research most of the building history itself. So it became challenging though, because this building dates, the original building that sat on the same spot dated back to the 1820s. I think it was opened in 1831. So the challenge that we ran into is that culturally they called this building a lot of different things. And when I looked up the information in the Commissioner's Journal, it was listed first as the Poor Farm or the Poor House. So they would actually list it in the Commissioner's Journals. And then also they listed it as the County Home for a while. And then I think they ultimately settled eventually on the Warren County Infirmary, which is what we refer to it today. And then this is a more current but still old photograph of that building. And this, if you're familiar with the way that the building looks today, they've done a lot of renovations to it to retrofit it for today. But so the ends, those have porches on them when it was the infirmary, and they've closed all of that in. So let's see. And like I said, originally we were just trying to tell the story of the building itself. So we didn't have any idea that we would get into such a rich history when it came to the people that lived in this building. And one of the really interesting things to me, and this is true of the Silver Street Jail as well, the people who ran the infirmary actually lived with the patients in the building. So we were able to find building blueprints that laid out where everything was located. And on the second floor in the very middle part, there was a whole apartment for where the family of the person who ran the building and his wife and their children would live. So that was fascinating to me, because that's a lot different than what I would think about. So like I said, we were looking through the information in our records, and I like to compare doing research at the archives public records to based on a true story fiction books, because you can get a lot of the overview of the information, but you kind of miss on the actual intimacy of the people history. So a little bit of background. We created this timeline panel for the building itself. So the infirmary, it used to be where they would entrust people in the community to take care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. So we encountered, while looking up information, there were people, so elderly people who couldn't take care of themselves, anybody who was mentally or physically unable to take care of themselves would stay there. They also had quite a few babies born there for people who needed help. Temporary help would stay there as well. So this building in the infirmary from its inception was really a place that people went to be taken care of. So like I said, a little bit about the history. So in 1831, the original building was built. We don't have a lot of information about what that looked like, and we haven't been able to locate any drawings or pictures of that. But there were 2 fires in the building. So the building that you see at the top in 1866, that was the first fire, and thankfully nobody was hurt. And they had managed to save the historic records from 1829 up through 1866 during that fire. And And that picture that you see is an actual picture of it on fire, which is interesting, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the building that you see today from 1915 was because that one burned down. So this will be the third, the building that you see today is the third of the 3 infirmaries. Some of the other things that we were able to uncover, so in 1900, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up just a little bit. So we were able to locate in the commissioner's journals when they built onto the property. So they had a separate house for the insane called the Madhouse, which was interesting. We haven't been able to locate on that picture which actual house was the one that they called the Madhouse. So they would separate any of the patients who were causing, trouble. And then they also had what was called a pest house, which was a pestilence house where they would put people who were who had different communicable diseases that were contagious. So those were a couple of the other things. And then it did work as a functioning farm, I believe up through the 1960s when it closed in 1967. And they immediately put some of the other county departments in that building. So as I talked a little bit about our records, those tell the general overview of the infirmary. So those gave us a great idea of the timeline from the beginning up until they closed it in 1967. And we were able to tell a lot about the building history. We were able to tell a lot about the people who had worked there and the people, or any of the updates or changes that they did to the building. But we were really missing the key component when it came to the people who actually lived in this building and the people who were being serviced at the county infirmary. So we don't have any pictures or anything. All we have are county records that are official records that are kept with the county. So we reached out to the Historical Society, and thankfully there's a woman named Leah Thompson. Her married name is Leah Jones. She had donated her scrapbooks to the Warren County Historical Society. And the best part about this is she takes pictures of all the stuff that's going on at the infirmary. So some of the images that you see, clearly it's a snow image with the horses, but then also we got some inside images of what they would do. So this is a picture on the very far side of the infirmary at Christmas, so that's one of the gathering rooms. The people who lived at the infirmary also participated at the farm. So if they were physically able, they would help around the farm. And the farm extended, I don't know the exact, but where all the county buildings are today, including the area where the elementary school is across the street, that was all part of the county farm. So they would go to the fair every year and present what they had grown, and they actually grew a lot of their own crops and stuff to feed themselves. So I liked that aspect of it. And then she has some other images around the farm. And then on the far right side, so the gentleman at the top, she labels him as Bobby. He shows up in a lot of the pictures. And then there's a couple images of some of the other patients that lived there, but she wrote little notes about each one of these people and maybe what their ailment was and why they were at the county infirmary. So accessing her scrapbook really just added the human element, and we were able to tell a lot about the patients. Because the patient records that we would have at the archives, those would be considered closed to the public because of their sensitive nature. So we couldn't look through those in order to present information about our exhibit. So the fact that we were able to utilize these photographs was life-changing for our experience when it came to actually putting a face to the people who lived at the infirmary. Let's see. And as I mentioned, it suffered from 2 separate fires. So this was the second building, and she had documented the actual fire. So it happened around, I think, noon time on December 31st, 1915. So thankfully, nobody was hurt in the second fire, but this fire did destroy all of the historic records that they had kept since 1831 when it opened. So we lost all of those records, which is unfortunate. But again, nobody was hurt. They did speculate, because this was the time of Prohibition, reasons that it might have started. So they don't know exactly what started the fire. but a lot of people who were dependent on alcohol might go there, so they said that that might be a target for people who were wanting prohibition. That was just one of the conspiracy theories in the newspaper. So, and then these are some more images of the building once it had burned down. And I show these because we didn't have any other images inside the building. So it was apparently, so it's 3 stories, and then it also had a courtyard in the middle, which none of the pictures show that. But I just thought it was fascinating because it's different to read about an event that happens. Because in our commissioner's journals, they're gonna say that they put out quotes to get the building rebuilt after the fire, but it doesn't really give you the full scope of what happened until you see images like this. So this is our exhibit that we opened in 2015. Like I said, we use primarily most of our own resources, accompanied with Leah's scrapbook and then some newspaper articles. This was the first exhibit I had participated in, and we were very excited to open it. Okay, so the really cool part about this, and I had just started my full-time position at Warren County Record Center so I was looking through our commissioner's journals, and like I said, we kind of had the timeline of the building, but I found this entry in the commissioner's journals from August of 1916. And as I'm reading through it, I'll summarize it really quickly. So it pretty much just says that they are appointing Judge J.A. Runyon to gather a box and to gather contents to go into the cornerstone of the building. So I'm reading this, and I had been looking through these commissioner's journals for like 3 days at this point, and I kind of made a little note, and then, you know, I kept doing more research, and then as I'm looking through my notes, I'm like, wait a minute, that kind of sounds like it might be a time capsule. But there's just no way, like, I found a time capsule that nobody else knew about, right? Because that just seems a little too much. So, you know, I noted that I had found something that seemed like it was a time capsule, but we were continuing, that was kind of in the middle of our research, so we were continuing our research, and as I was discussing it with Jen, the records manager, I was like, I'm pretty sure I found a time capsule. But clearly, like, somebody else in the county knows that this exists, because this seems like a big deal, especially for somebody who loves history. Well, come to find out, because they had transitioned it into the Health and Human Services building in the 1960s, they did not notate it anywhere. So, as we were asking around to the other county departments to see if anyone knew that this existed, nobody seemed to know anything about it. So as historic people, or people who love history, we were super, super jazzed about that. And of course, my first thought is, let's dig into this building, right? Because so the cornerstone sits about that high up and it's about that big. So, you know, clearly the commissioners aren't going to let us chisel into the building. So we did have to do a little bit more digging just to confirm that it had been put in there, because this, even though it was part of the official commissioner's journal entry, does not necessarily mean that it happened. So this was just appointing him to do it. So I was able to find the newspaper article that you see that was written about a week after they had a ceremony that they put the time capsule into the building. And they called it a treasure box, which I thought was really nice and neat. So we had found a couple different sources that proved that they had indeed put a time capsule in there. So our next step was to actually bring this to the commissioners. So we want everything to be official since we work for the county. So we presented our case to the commissioners to see if we could start the process of looking into this. And it just so happened that I found this in August of 2015. So that was about a year before it turned 100 years old. So unfortunately, we couldn't just dig into the building like we wanted to. They made us wait. So that's how I actually found the time capsule. And like I said, these commissioner's journals, they are a treasure box of information. You kind of just have to look through them. But so the actual process of extracting this, so we got the commissioners okay, and we created a committee to figure out the best process to actually get this thing out of the building. So first of all, we had to make sure that it was there, because we had no idea if they had taken it out prior to our discovery. So what we did was, we hoped, since it was from the early 1900s and plastic wasn't really a thing, we had hoped that the box would be made of metal based on other counties' boxes that they had had. So we did take a metal detector to the outside of the cornerstone, and thankfully it went off, which was super exciting. And this was such a long process. So we had to wait until March of 2016 to do the metal detector. So we had been building up the excitement prior to that, and we couldn't just come out right and say to the public, hey, we found a time capsule and it's almost 100 years old, because if it wasn't there, that would be kind of embarrassing. So they did make us do our due diligence and make sure it was there. So we dug a teeny tiny hole in there just to see if we could find something. So we did the metal detector, and then we, on a separate day, chiseled into the teeny tiny hole that you see here and did find a metal box, which was so exciting for all of us that were involved. And the other thing is, thankfully, we had our facilities department was very supportive of what we were doing, and they were just as excited as we were to open this thing. So this is March and April of 2016. And then, so we did go through the process of discussing, like, how are we going to get this thing out of the building? And some of the suggestions were to the same day to dig it out of the building or extract it from the building and then open it in front of the public. And we were kind of like, oh, I don't really think that that's going to work. So thankfully, we were able to, so we spent the Sunday, August 28th, chiseling it out of the building, and we didn't know how far it was in there, and we didn't know how big it was. So we had to be very careful, and the whole process, I think it took about 6 to 7 hours to actually get it out, because we didn't want to damage the front of the building where the date is when it was put in. So we had to just go in through the side. But these are some of the pictures of that day. And man, that box was wedged in there so good. So it did take quite a bit of wiggling, and then you don't want to damage the box. But thankfully, after about 6 or 7 hours of slowly chiseling away, we didn't do very much damage to the box or the building. So everything to the building was repairable. So these are images of that day and of the box. So we wanted to get it out as well because Greene County had extracted a time capsule from the early 1900s, and they actually had to saw into the box. So we also wanted to get this thing out of the building in enough time to make sure that we could get it open, because also sawing it into it while the public's watching probably wouldn't be very fun for us or them, because it might take a while. So unfortunately, they did not seal this box. So they just sat the lid on top of it, and you can see that it's, and I brought the box with me if you would like to look at it, but they just sat the lid on top of it. So, we did hold a public opening of the time capsule. This was done at a special commissioners meeting because, once again, since we work for the county, we want to make sure that everything's official. This was like the best Christmas I've ever had in my life. So we had about probably 200 people there or so. And Jen and I, thankfully, we had the support of all of the county officials that they let us do the opening, since we were the department that discovered it. It would be very easy for them to have just done it themselves. So thankfully, they were kind enough to let us be the ones to open it in front of the public. Like I said, the box was not sealed, so unfortunately at some point there were some critters, I think, or bugs that got in there, and then also some of the photographs that were in there emulsified over time or liquefied over time and then created mold. So some of the things that you're looking at, so clearly this is us opening the box in front of the public. They included, so if you, the newspaper article that I found that talked about the time capsule, it summarized everything that was in it. We didn't tell anyone else that because we wanted them to be surprised, but we kind of already knew what was in the box. So we weren't overly surprised when we found everything, but we were surprised at the condition. There were a lot of newspapers folded up pretty tightly in the box at the bottom, and then layered throughout the other parts of it. So there were some coins, and if you read the newspaper article, it talks about the students that were there, or I'm sorry, the children that were there the day that they dedicated the time capsule in 1916, and they just took their pocket change and threw it in there. So that's what the coins are, and I brought those with me as well. I thought that was really fun, and when I talked to the students, they really liked that aspect. that they actually involved the children in this, because the rest of it is mostly official county records. So they have a record about the building of the building and all the people involved in that. They also have a picture, so the picture in the middle on the bottom, that's Judge J.A. Runyon. So he was a representative, and you probably know a lot more about him than I do, but he was the person that gathered the box and contents for the time capsule. And then Leah Thompson, she's such a big player in this because she had an envelope with a letter and then with the photographs in it. So that's what the photographs on the bottom left-hand side, those were all the really moldy photographs. But it was really great, and the people that were there were very supportive, and it was a very fun day. So my husband and my daughter got to come, which was fun because she loves history, thankfully. So she was in love that day. Okay, so we extracted the time capsule, but we also wanted to leave something behind. So we created a new time capsule, and because this building had always housed people or tried to help the community in its past, we wanted to put stuff in the box that was reflective of how the different county departments help give back to Warren County. So we reached out to all the departments and asked them to submit something to us that helped tell a little bit about them and how they give back to Warren County. So we tried to fill it mostly with paper so that we didn't have another moldy situation. Thankfully, our facilities department built our box for us, and we double sealed it, so hopefully no moisture will get in. Our department, since we help preserve the history of Warren County, we each wrote a letter, mainly because that was one of my favorite things that we pulled out of our box. And since we work for the county, a lot of it is official county. So we wanted a little bit of a personal touch to it. So we each wrote a letter of how we give back to the community by helping to preserve the historic records. In my letter, it was a little bit lengthier. I told this entire presentation on a piece of paper to the future of what it was like to go through the process of finding the original time capsule. Mainly because I wanted them to get an idea of how exciting it was and what it was like to be there. I also had my daughter write a letter of what it was like to be there when we opened the time capsule. Some of the non-county documents that we put in there, we reached out to the local schools and had them write either an essay or create artwork of what they thought that Warren County would look like in 100 years. So we got some really great artwork from those students, and we're very appreciative that they wanted to participate. And then we also, so when we dedicated the new time capsule, we did it during a commissioners meeting to make sure that if anyone's researching this building in the future, they'll be able to find that information. And then we did leave a footprint behind in the form of a plaque so that it's very obvious what we would like to be done with our time capsule. So we did schedule that. We didn't put it in until October 4th of 2016. And then we did put that, and we assumed that the commissioners' meeting dates would be the same. So we scheduled that to be open on the commissioners' meeting date in 21-16. So some of the other things that we were tasked with after we uncovered the time capsule, remember the moldy issue? A lot of the photographs, the mold had eaten completely away at the image, so there was nothing left of them except for the actual paper that they were on. So we did throw some things away, which breaks my heart, but there was just nothing to be done with them. Some of the other things that we did to ensure that the stuff that did survive will not get moldy again. So this is Charles Price, and he came in and did a little workshop with us about how to get rid of the mold that had started to grow and make sure that it remains dormant. That's one of the reasons we don't bring more stuff with us when we show off what we found in the time capsule, because we don't want any cross-contamination. But one of the things that we were able to salvage was the letter that Leah had written to the people in the future. And I'll tell a little bit more about her. So this is us, and then we were able to digitize all of the newspapers that we found as well. So that way, if anybody needs them, we can always send them a copy. So this is my favorite part. because, like I said, most of these documents we can look up in the county records. But Leah Thompson, she was the daughter of the gentleman who ran the infirmary and his wife. And she was just such a character. And you could tell in the little notes that she made in her scrapbook that she just had probably an over-the-top personality. But her letter that she wrote to us, so she goes into detail about what it was like to be there, during the fire. And then she also talks a little bit about what they did with the patients while they were rebuilding the building. And she says in there, if she hadn't dried up and blowed away, that we should get together and have a talk fest. So I always like to talk to the students about that, because just the way that she spoke is clearly so much different than we would today, which I just love and find so fascinating. And I always ask them what they would say to their friends, like if you want to get together and play video games or get together and hang out and get coffee. So, but the best line of the entire letter is she signs it at the bottom, Leah Christine Thompson, 23 years old and still single. Like it was the worst thing that ever happened to her. So she was still living at the infirmary with her parents. So that was in 1916. And the interesting thing, she did eventually get married a couple years later. She ended up marrying one of the people who worked for the infirmary. And her husband, Jack, so his name is Jack Jones, so they ended up running the infirmary as well. And I believe they ran the infirmary up through the mid-1940s. And I want to say their family home is the one at the corner. It's on Broadway. Oh, now I'm going to forget it. So anyways, I'm sorry. But this is a picture of her and Jack together before they got married. And then I was able to locate their marriage record, which just kind of completed her whole story for us. Because as I said earlier, because we only have county records, they'll give you the broad overview of everything, but you kind of have to insert the personality of some of these people yourself. So the fact that we were able to utilize and locate that scrapbook was just, it changed the whole thing for us. And then a little bit about what we've been able to do since the infirmary time capsule. When we started this process in 2015, the Record Center was established in 2001, and what we had been doing up till that point was kind of organizing all of our records, because prior to that, they just existed in whichever department. So in 2001, we got all the records, and Pat Grove, who worked there, she spent a lot of time making sure that those records were organized and where they should be. So we're constantly finding new stuff. But 2015 was really the jumping off point for us to do a lot of these other projects like community outreach or like creating these exhibits. And the fact that we found this time capsule right when we were beginning all of the other stuff has really just pushed us to reach out to the community and share everything that we are doing, because it is exciting and we want everyone to be involved in what we do. So some of the other programs that we've been doing, I do education outreach. So I go into the classroom and teach students about archives. That has a lot to do with the fact that most students don't know what an archives is. And I've seen students from first grade up through 8th grade so far, and none of them know what it is. Like, they might raise their hand because they recognize that word, but I'm really giving them a chance to utilize places like the Warren County Historical Society or our Record Center if they need to do research. So that's one of the things with my job that I love the most, because they are just so excited and they had no idea what an archivist was. So being able to teach them about archives and what you can do with them is probably the best part of my job. We utilize the infirmary time capsule as like a detective thing and teach them, like, you might discover something that's been completely forgotten about, and they really like that aspect. It's almost like a treasure hunt for them. Some of the other things that we've been able to do, so we do community shreds as well. We've done an open doors, which is like a day in Ohio where they open different historic buildings, and you can do tours. So we put together the history of the court building, which we were able to find every edition they ever put on that building, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's layered a lot. So there's a couple on the back side, there's one on the front side. So we were able to find all of the commissioners' journal entries where they built onto that building, and then we were able to share that with the public. Another really big project we are working on right now is our newest exhibit is about the county jail on Silver Street, which has been vacant for quite a while. So one of the things that we've been able to do, so we created our exhibit, but also we've been working with our facilities department to open that building back up to the public. It has been sitting vacant, and unfortunately our previous director did not take care of it very well. So there were some major leaking issues and stuff like that. But up to this point, we've been able to fix fix a lot of the issues inside. And then eventually what we would like to do is open this building to tours. And I'm not sure if anybody here's been to this building. I've heard stories where they used to take young school children through the building, which I always found fascinating. The people who experience that as children have some very interesting stories to tell, which is amazing. And that leads me to another one of our projects that we're working on. So we're conducting oral histories. In our oral history project, we are trying to gain experience from the people who were at any of these buildings, either working, the people who live there. We were able to do an oral history with the Satterthwaite family because they were the last family to live in the Silver Street jail. So we were able to talk to them about their experience of living there and working there and being a child there, which was really fascinating. So we hope that we can get more people or reach out to more people so that they'll share their experiences. Some of the other things that we do, so we do have a Facebook page. I know John mentioned that earlier. What I do on there is I share all of this type of stuff. So any projects that we're working on for the county, we try to make sure that we share them regularly and share videos and photographs of what we are doing. Mainly because aside from all of the community outreach, we've been trying to actually go through the historic records that we have for the county and create indexes so that people who aren't just at the archives can do research. We're trying to make those records available online to as many people that want to look at them. So far we've created quite a few online indexes, and then we've also been able to scan some of the more historic documents and put those images available online. So if you ever want to do research in our archives and can't make it, you can go online and look at a lot of that information. So that is all I have for you today.
Well, Jenifer, thank you very much. I think we all enjoyed this. Okay. Folks, please come up and take a look at some of the things that were found in the time capsule over here on this table, and hope to see you next month for the story of Jerry Mock, the first woman to fly solo around the world, and also take a look at the Harmon Student Art Exhibit, which we have behind us here. Hope to see you again soon.